So, the first thing you really want to look at when talking about a bio for your band, or if it's just you as a singular musician or an artist, is what story are you going to tell? It doesn't matter if you have 8 band members, or like I said, or if it's just one person. This is the foundation, this is the framework that the bio is going to be built upon. And we'll get into in just a few minutes the different types, the different lengths. But regardless if you're looking at a long form, which is common to PR campaigns and things of that such, and when sending these out to online journalists and so forth. But we're going to be looking at the story, and that framework is what is going to dictate the tone and timbre of your bio, and what is going to hook an audience in, and that's really what we want to do. So, in that vein, that story, you're going to need to decide and let your personality come through. What story, what kind of story, how are you going to tell that story? Do you want something that's basically facts? Some people, they prefer a dry bio. This is something which is basically A to Z, details how you came together or how you learned music, what inspired you, EPs, singles, record releases, and then currently what you're pitching. Some people prefer that. Some people prefer something a little bit more, shall we say, flowery. Something that uses a few more words than might be necessary, but it creates a theatrical presentation to your work and to the words. So when you're looking at either way, you want to imbue these bios with experiences that have shaped your musical trajectory. A mixture of personal fact and myth building to a certain degree, because you want this to stand out. You want to have a sense of the theatrical to this, because regardless of what you're trying to pitch, whether it's a single, an album, whatever, you have to have that hook, and that story is that first place where you're going to get them. So, all of that being said, there is a balance that must be maintained between being succinct when necessary and being not necessarily long-winded, but a bit more effusive when the circumstances dictate, when they allow. So there's a good balance to be seen there. Now, you really need to be aware that the details are important. And the more unique the detail, the more important it could be to the overarching story that you're trying to tell. And you never know sometimes what one reader will pick up on and what one reader will disregard. For instance, I found that a geographical detail can be very, very helpful in grounding a bio, such as you're including in your first paragraph, that hook paragraph, 10 miles east of the Tennessee River, there's a town, so on and so forth. Immediately, we're grounded. We have a geographical presence. We know where we are. It can be the same for Southern California, the Pacific Northwest, the East Coast. There are ways to ground and to create a mood via geographical location. So that's sometimes can be a very, very interesting way to begin a bio. It really depends on the personality and really what you're wanting to say as well. So that's just an instance. But the more unique and the more specific a detail like that, I think really conveys that you're not underselling your story and that you are aware that these things do matter. So, like I said, a good balance between having too much information and too little information. There is a really nice sweet spot in there between giving them just enough to want to continue to read, but not so much that it's just a big, couple of blocks of text that are really going to put them off. So with that in mind, we're going to look at the format. And I've come across a particularly good format in constructing these bios. Now, we're going to look at the long form bio first, because this is what you're going to use to create your short form bio. And that's going to run you about 2 to 3 paragraphs. And that's a very specific reason. There is a reason why we have that short form. And then there's the brief bio, which is 2 to 3 sentences long. And there is, again, a very specific reason we have these types of bios. Different pitches, different venues, different outlets call for these different bios, and we need to have them all at your disposal, so when the situation presents itself, you know exactly which one to send. So the first paragraph in this long form bio is going to be the hook. And this is kind of what we've talked about already. The detail that's going to get that reader in, whether it's a radio personality DJ, whether it's someone who's writing for an online music review site, and of course you know all of the major ones probably by now, whether it's a local newspaper, something like that, a college newspaper. This is the hook. So the first 2 sentences generally are the most important of the hook. What can you write? What can you convey that makes them want to read past that second sentence. That's the hook. What kind of music do you play? And again, we're talking in broad terms. Again, your personality needs to shine through. Humor, when used the right way, can be a really great asset here. But we want to take ourselves seriously. Even if you're a little bit of a jokester, the music, may not be the most serious in the world. Never sell yourself or your music short. That's a really big thing to be aware of. I don't care if you're joking about the dog next door or writing songs about whatever. Your music, it's something very serious to you. This is something you've poured your life into, your heart and soul into. Don't undercut your story. Don't undercut yourself. So the hook is what's going to get them to get into you initially. And so we need to give them that hook. What are some of the details that you've grown up? Were you a prodigy? When did you pick up a guitar, learn to play the piano? Do you live next to the Grand Canyon? I mean, like I said, the geographical locations are really good here because they can tie you to a place and a geographical identity that really helps to establish a pattern for the following paragraphs. Speaking of which, paragraphs 2, 3, we're talking about the history of you or the band. When did you start playing? What music made an impact upon you? What inspired you to create? This can be generally condensed from 2, maybe even to 1 paragraph, depending on how much history with music that you have. Again, that balance between too much and too little is very important. 4 to 7 paragraphs. This is what are you pitching? Single, album, music video. It doesn't matter what it is. This is where you need to talk about it. And within this, what are you pitching? You need to discuss if you had previous releases. So if you're on your sophomore record, your second record, and you had a debut LP, and then we're pitching this one, you need to briefly, so that there is a history. This kind of ties into the history paragraphs as well, that you have had these experiences of releasing these songs, and you don't need to go into detail about them. We don't need the life history of every release that you've ever done, but we do need a sort of a timeline of your experience and your hard work, because that's what you're wanting to show here, is that your hard work is paying off and is allowing you to continue to move forward and continue to play music and to perform and to release. So that's part of what are you pitching is. So go into detail. These songs, if it's a new record, you can even pull maybe 5 or 6 songs. I don't necessarily think that you need to talk about every single song on your record, unless it's an EP. If you've got 2, 3, 4 song EP, that would be perfectly fine. But again, we don't want to overload with just huge blocks of text here. So if you've got a 10, 12, 14 track release that you're pitching, pick a handful of songs, the strongest songs, and talk about them, talk about how they interrelate, the inspirations, the origins of those, because those are the ones that people are going to gravitate towards, because those are the ones that you gravitate towards. Not that you dislike any of the other songs, but these are the ones that are going to get someone to listen to the other songs that you didn't mention. So at the end, we've got paragraphs 8 and 9. These are the summary paragraphs. And again, this can be condensed to about 1 paragraph. And we're wanting to bring the story home. We've talked about where you've been. We've talked about where you are right now. Now we get to talk about where you want to be. We're going to finish up talking about the record or video that you're pitching right now. This is the place where you can talk about any upcoming tours, current conditions that may not be possible. But this would be a position maybe in a year and a half, where maybe talking about an already scheduled upcoming tour would be taking place. Also, current conditions, if you have a regular virtual stream, like say if you have Facebook or something online where you stream your performances, this would be someplace, at least in the near future of these kind of bios, would not be a bad idea to mention. We, again, don't overload the information, but create a summary of everything you've talked about, where people can find the music, what you want to do going forward, and just wrap it all up with a nice big bow. This is what people want. We want it concise. We want to leave people feeling good. And basically, a bio is for someone to get to know you. And by the end of that paragraph, that summary paragraph, we want them to feel like they've gotten to know you a little bit more, that they have an odd sense of relationship with you. They've gotten to know you. Because whether you're pitching for simply a radio play or a playlisting spot, or maybe a premiere on an online website, people are going to be digging through this bio for details. They're going to be constructing. Some may even copy it verbatim. Some do. Some writers use it as use this information and completely reconstruct their own story. That's what we're trying to give them. We're trying to give them the tools to talk about you and your music creatively and with little effort. We want to provide them everything they need. So I talked about the different types of bios. That's the long form bio. So quickly, we're going to talk about the short form bio. Again, 2 to 3 paragraphs. And generally what you're looking for, this is going to be for Spotify, SoundCloud to a lesser extent still though, Bandcamp, because we want some information there on those sites. We really do. But we don't want anything near the length of your long form biography. Now this presents really unique opportunities of rearranging that long form bio into something almost playful. You still want to get all of that information across, but because you're having to whittle that down to, I don't want to say just a snippet, but that's basically what it is. It's a snapshot of the long form bio. You're wanting to get your information across in a paragraph, maybe paragraph and a half. That's really, people just want to read a few lines, click play. And that's really all you want them to do in this setting. You don't want them to spend, a minute or two drudging through words when you just want them to listen to the music. So forget the long form history when writing these bios for streaming, possibly radio play. DJs get, and they still get CDs in the mail. So that's also a viable alternative now. But they don't want to read a dozen bios from bands wanting to get played on the radio, these 1,000-word treatises. They just want enough information to know that they're going to take a chance on you. They're going to spend their airtime on you or their spot in a playlist on you. So narratives generally are for PR campaigns, not radio play. Just be aware of that. We have to make that story a lot shorter and a lot more concise. Now, this is where we come into influences. So I didn't mention this specifically in the long form because in the long form, you don't want to get bogged down in my music sounds like Brian Eno, or my music sounds like the Velvet Underground, or Yo La Tengo, or Belle and Sebastian, or Radiohead. You want to use these... You want to use the names of other bands pretty sparingly, to be honest. You want to let people be aware of your inspirations without being weighed down by those influences, because that can happen really easily, because then all you hear is, well, they sound like Radiohead, or they sound like, Superchunk, or whatever the case may be, and the identity of your music kind of gets swallowed up in that process. So again, keep the influences, keep the inspirations, keep those band names to a minimum. Specifically with radio play, the recommend if you like is not necessarily a bad option in this particular instance with the radio play, because someone's looking at it. They don't have much time to make a decision as a DJ. They see, okay, this sounds like, Stereolab or Tortoise or whatever the case may be. It gives them a better idea where they can place that song if they have different programs throughout the day. So that actually is making it even easier for them. They don't really want to get into your history. So be aware, we pitch differently to different outlets, different venues, and it's very, very apropos to know how to pitch to each one. It's very, very important. So again, when we talk about radio play, we're talking about short form Spotify. If you've had previous press, whether it's a local paper, a college paper, whether it's a local website, whether it's a national website, this is a place to pepper in those comments, those quotes, the pull quotes, the best reflect out of whatever review you received, whether it be a live review for a concert maybe, or a virtual stream, or just a single that was released, or a music video. This is a place for that, because again, it gives a better overall representation very quickly. Again, press quotes are not so much for the long form bio, but for the short and for the radio play, this is again giving them all the information at their fingertips to make a decision pretty quickly whether they want to hit play or want to add you to that playlist. Again, unique opportunities to pitch to different places. It's actually pretty fun to kind of tailor to each individual place. So have fun with it. I mean, this is really, you want to have fun doing this. This should not be a chore. I know this is not making music. I know it's not probably what you want to do. You want to be in the studio right now, but this is a facet of being a musician and getting your music out there and getting the recognition and growing, as much as I hate to use the term brand, growing your music. Let's say that. We want to continue to grow your music and to grow your audience and to allow people to come to know you through that. The only thing that I'll mention kind of as a tangent to this is when you're looking at Spotify and playlisting, because that's has come up a lot lately is you want to maximize your profile, whether it's Spotify or the Bandcamp page, with updated bio. Every time you add something to that bio, every time something happens that is worthy to be added, update that. Do not let that go out of. Don't let that expire. That information. Can't tell you how many times just going through for me that I've come across bios and they haven't been updated for a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years. And I can understand people get busy, bands are in the studio, they're touring. This is something that's very, very important. Please update your bios on your websites and your EPKs. Please just make sure anytime something comes up, if you have a new single, a new EP, give it a dust off. Turn some words around. Don't just use the same exact one every single time, because that gets old for a lot of readers. Promote updated information through social media outlets. This is not necessarily tied directly to your bio, but again, it's kind of runs parallel. If you make a change to your bio, let people know. If you find it relevant enough to add that you want people to know, like in your long form bio, let everybody know. Don't just let it, oh, I made this little change or I added this about the new record. Let people know. Link to your press page if you have one, or your bio page if you have one on your website. This is important stuff. So pitch is short, specific links, specific outlets, know who you're pitching to, and basically they're listeners. So don't try pitching the wrong type of music to the wrong type of program or the wrong outlet. So do your research, do a little bit of homework. Don't just send out 1,000 emails hoping that you'll get maybe 2 responses. It's better to be more personable than more universal. If you can create a personable email, say an email in this case, to a handful of journalists or whatever, that's going to be better than mass sending 1,000 people with some staid template with your music and a paragraph and a picture. Make it personal. That makes it more personal for the person receiving it. Honestly, they're more likely to listen if it feels like they wrote it directly to you. So tailor your pitch to the recipient. That's really, really a big takeaway here is what I'm trying to say is wherever you're sending it, make sure that you tailor it specifically to their needs and to their preferences. So on to that, we're talking about pitching. And I've talked about the ways that you can pitch to blogs versus radio and print. Print's a little different. Print is its own thing because it's so difficult. So we're not even really going to talk about that. We're going to focus on the things that you can do from your computer with blogs and with radios, and you can continue to move along that. Always include the links. When you include these emails, when you compose these emails, include links to your most recent social media sites, to your Bandcamp, to whatever is where your music is streaming, with the caveat, make sure that you have a free streaming available. Don't assume that everyone has Apple Music or Tidal or some premium streaming service. They may, but we need to make it as easy for them to listen to your music as possible. So just keep that in mind. Also, once you've sent this out, you've constructed your bio, whether it's for the radio play or whether it's for something online, allow time for that to be read. There are literally thousands and thousands of artists who are doing the same thing as you are. Not to take away from your hard work, but everyone wants to be heard. But you have to give them time to read your emails. Don't bombard them with emails one day after another. That's the surest way to make sure that they're going to delete that. So you really want to focus on the meat of your bio, who you're pitching it to. And a lot of times when you're writing these bios, you could be tempted to completely break out of the rules, go meta almost. And I would say that while vastly different bios generally gather initial looks, they certainly do. Traditional bios, kind of what we've talked about, are always going to win out in the end. Unless the narrative calls for it, never write a bio in the first person using I or we collectively. I mean, this is a way, because if you don't do it all the way through one, it's going to be completely jarring the shift in perspective. And it's going to show that you're not maybe quite as professional as they might hope you are, because honestly, you do need to be as professional as possible. This is a very good sign of a band or an artist who is confident in their work and really showing that they've put the time in to construct this email or this pitch in a way that applies specifically to you. Grammar is important. I can't stress that enough. I don't care what you're pitching, if it's classical music, if it's ambient, if it's drone, if it's indie rock, if it's hip hop, it doesn't matter. The way you construct your email, this is, and I tell people, this is an extension of your bio. Any communication that you have, whether it's on the phone, possibly more likely email, this is excuse me, an extension of your bio and your brand of your work. So make sure that you're cultivating it as such. You're cultivating it wisely. So, like I said, email presentation should absolutely be considered. Try not to piece together an email from different, copying your bio from a website, pasting it into an email, and then sending it, because the differences in fonts and sizes can really be jarring and really unprofessional. So what I would say is construct your email outside of your email server. Make sure it looks perfectly fine. Make sure all the fonts are aligned. Make sure all of the links work before you send it. This is very important. Again, you need to be professional. If you're not professional, why should the person on the other end why should they care, honestly? So you need to, like I said, you need to be serious about your music, regardless of what type of music you play. Don't undercut yourself to undercut your music. And the best way to undercut yourself, basically, is to seem lazy in this department. And we really don't want that to be the case. I know you're not lazy. Sometimes it's easier to copy and paste things into an email, but please, this makes a difference. I've received a lot of emails every day, and when I see it, I can definitely tell who has spent more time constructing this email with an eye towards attracting someone's attention, and someone who's just copied and pasted different parts into an email. So be aware that's extremely important. So, like I said, always update your bio appropriately. Like I said, humor used sparingly within this whole situation, even in your informal correspondence with writers, photographers, possibly, if you're doing shoots and things like that for your bio, for your EPK. Just be professional, treat them as you would have them treat you, and just understand that every single time or every moment that you're interacting with someone, they are associating that with your music, with you and your music. So the better that you better you carry yourself, the better your chances are of someone taking a chance on your music. And that's really what this is all about.